Hi, it's Fatal Friction here, and today I'm going to give you my thoughts on what makes a live set. And what gave me the idea to do this video was that I saw a conversation on Facebook. There was a conversation about live shows and electronic music. It's always an interesting question because a lot of electronic music producers aren't classically trained musicians, didn't have piano lessons, and even if you haven't had piano lessons, you may have still learnt to play an instrument on your own. There are electronic musicians out there which aren't classically trained, which didn't have any lessons, which are self-taught instrument players, and they can bring that into a live show, and it's amazing when somebody does that. And a really good example, if you saw it recently, was Vampire Stepdad show, which is up on YouTube. I'll have to find a link, and I'll put it in the description once I found it. That's a really good example of a live show for electronic music. It also depends on the music you're writing. Some music really lends itself well to live performances. And now then, for a lot of music producers like myself, I wouldn't be able to stay in a scale on a keyboard. You can set that up in some software with devices to kind of force it into a scale. But again, your timing has to be in a pocket. My timing's not really that in a pocket. And you know, I could do that live. I could play the thing. And then there's also the issue of, like, how do you recreate your actual tracks, especially if by the time you finish the project, the CPU is nearly redlining. That's also a complicated issue. On the thread I saw on Facebook, there's a lot of other things. There's a bit of anguish involved as well, which was someone was pointing out that, you know, they went to see a live show, I think it was with Carpenter Brute, and they saw a live show with Perturbator. They were complaining about the price a bit and the live elements in the show, in each show, and that one had more than the other, but it was cheaper. And it's like, I was just going to say that's down to the promoter. It's like, I can't imagine at this stage, synthwave artists asking for astronomical fees for performances. I think it's more likely down to the promoter. Either maybe that's their only source of income, or maybe they were taking a risk because I mean, the synthwave is getting popular, but you'd have to wonder, like, how many people might turn up. I mean, I don't know the full details of the event, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but €40 does seem a bit much for a night out. I mean, maybe I haven't been going out enough recently and prices have changed a lot, but the other show was I think was $20, €20, and that's a sweet deal to see somebody with live instruments. But going back to the Vampire Stepdad show, it's got a very own stepdad there on the keys and the guitar and switching in between them for both songs. And then you've got on the drums, you've got a guy on the drums. So it's like, if you are going to do that, then you've got to pay your drummer. And it's like, okay, so then the cost of the show is mounting up, which is another thing about playing live that I kind of wanted to get to. And I think it's something that may be something that has kind of gone on in Europe for a while, and that America is not yet fully part of the culture. And I think that's how normal it is in Europe to go places with DJing and DJs. And when we had the digital revolution and people started, no, I'm not. Obviously, like this happened in America too. It's not. I get the impression it's not as kind of mainstream here and is it Europe. And I mean, in Holland, for example, it's like kids grow up wanting to be, instead of footballers, wanting to be DJs. Like, for example, Martin Garrix is apparently what he said. All the kids are taking the piss out of him because they're like, but it's more and more common because you've got people like Tiesto, and they have represented Holland in the Olympics by performing at Olympic ceremonies. Not that I'm pretty much not a fan of Tiesto, but I liked his earlier Ghost Producers works. Yeah, so I'm not really ever really been in. I always found it a bit airy-fairy for me when I was back in the day, when I was into that kind of music. But that's another story entirely I might get into sometime. So what I've experienced is having DJed for a few years myself, and then you had the digital revolution, and then what you saw first was people behind laptops actually DJing with laptops, but they weren't really DJing, and they basically would have you guys probably are familiar with Ableton and how or Fruit Loops. You've got your playlist, and you're probably familiar with how you'd have one track here and then one. I saw these guys DJing once, and that's what they had. They had one track here, and they were just they were like fading from one track to the other, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'll link this back into what I'm talking about. But the whole point of DJing is that you're reading the crowd. It's not just about playing your favorite tracks, although that kind of, I feel that's kind of an important part of it, because I think if you're going to DJ, you need to kind of have fun with it, unless it's just a job, you know. But so you're DJing, you're having fun, you're reading the crowd, and you're seeing what is making them dance, and you've got to make them last for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. So you've got to keep them interested. So you can't always just go full pelt. You kind of have to bring it down a bit, like in intensity, and then bring the intensity back up again at the end. I wish I had a tissue. God damn it. Yeah, so there's that element, and so you see people coming out of laptops, and they've had all the tracks lined up, and that would be them mixing. And that's a fucking joke, pardon my French. You might, it's like, so you're just moving the fader now. Okay, I'm going to get off my high horse. So that was kind of when the digital revolution started happening. Really, I mean, you had CDs, but still, you'd be beat matching with them. And then people would, it became a bit more frequent. That I only saw that once, I think, that I can remember. And then the rest of the time, people would have tracks already beat stretched. It was a bit controversial at the time, actually having things already beat synced, but now it's everywhere. So you'd have people having them in scenes and live, and they would trigger them. So you could still read the crowd. You could still trigger the tracks, and then get that feeling of live interaction with the crowd. Like, I'm playing one thing here, they don't like that. They'll stop going in that direction, I'll go in this direction. And this is, I wanted to bring this in because this is something that in electronic music, which is kind of different to, like, if you go see like a band or whatever, they have a set list, and they're pretty much going to stick to that set list, I would imagine. I mean, I'm not that too familiar because I've spent so much time in the electronic world, but imagine with most bands, they have a set list, all the people on stage know what they're going to play when, and maybe at the end, they kind of have a couple, like they know the older songs, and they're figuring out on the fly which tracks they're going to do encores with. So that maybe, I don't know, I guess it's a case-by-case basis, but imagine with the very big bands, the kind of more manufactured, the more bureaucratic bands, they have, I'd imagine they have, like, this is what I'm going to play. I can imagine Rammstein might be a bit like that, like, these are the tracks we are going to play. This one, then this harder one, then the Flames one, then the ones about Americas. So, yeah, that's my Rammstein impression. Stein. Tomato. Yeah, so that there's that thing in electronic music where your set list is changing, and that kind of in itself, while you're pressing play, is really quite something. You're talking about reading people, you're talking about reading a whole audience, and if you do it wrong, you stink, and if you get it right, you're a hero. So I can't really knock just pressing play where you are making things up as you go along. You know, I mean, today with beat syncing, that's the thing with beat syncing. It's like, once you have done it for so many years, it's like you don't even really think about beat matching. So to have it automated, you know, originally was a controversy, but now I don't think anyone really cares that much. You know, a lot of people really care about the sound of vinyl, but I mean, if you have had any back problems, you're going to be sick of carrying those vinyls around. Tell me about it. It's just like, as soon as it got to the point where everywhere had CD players, I switched to CDs, because, oh my god, and also because you could then to that point you could buy tunes online, and burn them. So it was like when everything moved on to Beatport, then it was like, okay, well, it's kind of, like a lot of record stores died out, but another story for another time. Going back to the live show situation, when is a live show a live show? There's a reference here to somebody, and they were singing. I'm probably not going to stick to the thread on this one that much. I'm just using it here as a kind of a thing to go along. So there's a reference here to somebody, and they were singing. They were singing to their music, I think. Where is it? Oh, I can't find it now. So there's some guy, and it's a live show, and he's singing to music. And I think, I mean, if their lyrics are really good, and in order to sing well, they have to just fully focus on that. Full disclosure, I think that's okay as a live show. It's a personal standards thing. It's like if you have to perform and you don't have the resources to hire people, or you're too worried about the financial risk, I think that's okay, because, I mean, otherwise you're kind of, why would you rob the world of a performance like that? You either have that singing performance or none. And as a singer, you need to get good somehow. You need to get a better performer. So maybe once that person is singing long enough, they develop the skill to do more than one thing at once. So then maybe they can sing and play a synth then at the same time, which to me it would be mind-bogglingly difficult, because I can't even sing that well. You can put things through a vocoder, that's kind of like a cheat that will work, but then you've got to be good at, you've got to be in the pocket on the keys as well, and got your chords right or your melody right. So it's kind of difficult. I mean, one tip I would give, because I am planning, I'm trying to figure out a live show that I can be happy with and call it a live show. And one of the things I had got a few years back was the Chaos Lot Pro, and I know you couldn't really do a whole thing with it live, but it does have a really mean vocoder in it, like one of the best I've heard. And the shame is that the presets aren't tweakable. It's got 5 vocoder presets, but the legibility of it is really good compared to some of the other vocals. You can kind of make out what's being said. So that would be my hot tip. And I don't want to give out too many spoilers, so people beat me to it, because I'm kind of nervous, a little bit nervous about playing out live and about using the live tag myself, which is kind of why I made this video, because I'd like to put my thoughts out there and see what people think, because maybe you guys can help me figure out what would be the best way for me to do a live show. Because here's the thing: it's when you don't have much dispendable income, you're kind of worried about bringing gear on the road then, because if that's gone, it's like, shit, I can't use that in the studio, or I can't do that with another live show. I was honestly thinking about doing the thing with having the tracks in clips in Bitwig. So I have Bitwig. Unfortunately, I haven't bought Ableton, but kind of thinking at some point it'd be good to get. So I have the clips there, and then trigger them after reading the crowd, they want hard stuff, so I play faster stuff, or this is too much too soon, so I play something from Palm FM. I play Beautiful June, and then my idea was to ad-lib over it. I don't know if you ever listened to my EP Fuck You Girl. That is I kind of, it's a mixture of when I've done some of the lyrics there, is a mix. How I do it is a mixture of freestyling and then editing. So I come up with something that sounds cool, and then I repeat it until it does my head in. So maybe 4 or 5 times, and then I try and think of something else, and then I go back and I listen to about 20 minutes of music, and then I pick out the bit that sounds the coolest, and then that's the hook. And so that's how it was a little bit with the track Fuck You Girl. So obviously I'm super, or not obviously, but I mean, I'm super critical of my vocal skills, and I know they're not that great, but that's another thing. That could be another video, when is it okay to sing or not? Because people like authenticity, people like vulnerability, I think, but I mean, God, somebody let me know what they think of that EP. Honestly, I think a good fan of mine, Manducator, he said a couple of things on Facebook about it, But I would like to hear from other people whether that's really their thing or not. But anyway, go off on tangent. So what I would like to do is basically take the K-Oscillator Pro. So I've got my K-Oscillator Pro, and I've got a Windows tablet to put the clips on. And so I trigger the clips, and then maybe I have, if I can get it all set up, and not, that's the other thing, latency, but if I can get it all setting up, not too much latency, and I can trigger clips, and I can mix them together as a kind of DJ, and then ad-lib over it without it being too cheesy, then that's what I would do. Or maybe, and also have some kind of way to automate effects. And this is another thing I want to get to, because the more complicated you make your laptop, your let's say laptop or tablet setup, it's like the less you are going to be in the flow of things, the more you are going to be going, oh my god, like, where's that short, what's the shortcut again? Oh, where's the button to do this? And in a live situation, that's not really what you need. I don't think most software, even though they try to, is not that inducive to perform in a live environment. And I think it requires a huge understanding of, I quite like how Machine looks. I don't have Machine, but I quite like how, having seen some of the demo videos, especially for Machine Jam, how people do stuff live on that. But again, it's then with some of your old tracks, then you've got to port them into the context of Machine, and then you're like, oh mate, where are you going next with it? I don't know. It's just, it's a lot of preparation. Here's the other thing with mixing and stuff. It's with electronic music, a large part is the mix down and the mastering, and you kind of want to have that when you play out live. It's difficult, I mean, and then you've got to think about your CPU, and then when you think about your CPU, you've got to think about latency. I was talking to Vampire Stepdad. He was having latency problems getting ready for his gig, and I'd be interested to know how he got around that. So yeah, leave a comment if you can there. That is a problem, because some of my tracks I have, especially some for example Lap of Glory, I think I've got two different synths for two different melodies, and I've got another lead synth that's kind of like a pad, and then I've got an actual pad, I've got an arpeggio, and I've got a bass line to the best of my memories, and and they're not that CPU friendly synths, and then I have all my processing, so all my EQ and compression, and I think it's probably about 90%, 80% CPU. I don't know. So it's yeah, and then to perform that live, it's I don't think I could play any of that with a keyboard live. Maybe one of the the pad type lead. The rest of it would not be in the pocket that much, and with latency, it'd probably be even further out. So, what do I do with a limited budget? Do I hire loads of people to play it for me, or do I bring one of my synths on that doesn't have the same sound as the soft synth that I made to use the track, but say have an Akai Miniac, which is a digital. It's something I could bring, but then you're gathering more and more stuff to bring to the gig. I don't know if you know, I'm not from a band background. I'm from a DJ background, and it's oh man, it's just with the nerves enough of I salute anyone that is willing to bring all this gear they really care about on stage, because I get paranoid someone rob it from the club. I've had USB sticks go missing and stuff. It's not quite as bad as having a whole synth go missing, or so yeah, that would bother me. And that's the other thing I wanted to get at, because especially, I don't know about America, especially in Europe, you'd be able to get do a live set on a lineup with other DJs, and maybe in a small club, and you won't get any of the treatment that an actual a band might get. I say might get, because maybe sometimes bands don't get that good treatment, but usually there's you'll have time to set up and stuff, but it's not really like that in a club, and people may not know that you're doing a live set, which is another thing I'm going to get to, because people can't really tell what you're doing. But I remember I tried to do a live set. I made stems. I was when I was doing a lot of techno. I made stems for a whole bunch of tracks, and I put them all in to the laptop when it was still working, and I would like trigger them, and then like oh god, it was the most complicated thing. Because I had like probably 6 parts really per track, and I bounced loops of them all and brought them all up, and it was really, really complicated, and I didn't know what was going on half the time. And then folks were coming up to me and talking to me, and because I was on an earlier slot, so things were just kind of warming up, but folks I knew were coming up and talking to me, and just like, he didn't even know that I was doing a live set. I'm doing a live set. And I didn't want to be rude, because like in a small club, when you're DJing, it's like it's more about kind of being friendly with people and like listening to what they have to say and not being a total cunt. But it's like if you're doing a live set, you have to be like, fuck off. No, but you have to kind of be like, you're like, don't you understand what I'm trying to do? It's fucking complicated. You can't really compare. So there's that. I think there's that issue that I've had. So it's like, just to summarize the last 10 minutes, the more complex you make it, the more things can go wrong, and the more stressed you will be, and probably the less you'll enjoy it. Like, and the less room you have to kind of to do improvisations. Instead, what you do are accidents, and if you're lucky, happy accidents, which also is not a nice thing. So it kind of depends. But like, if you don't want to be stressed out of your mind, don't make it too complicated. So when is a live set? So you can hire. So your options are to try to do everything yourself and make it really complicated and make it as live as possible. But you'll never get everything to be live as possible unless your tracks just consist of like one keyboard riff and maybe a bass line, and then you could like have 2 and then play them like this, like these old Italo guys. But then you need somebody with like a drum on the side going psh, 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 and then you'll have your live set. And then you need a drum machine as well. But then the drum machine isn't live, so you can't use that. Forget about it. You've got to have someone who's like live drumming on the drum machine. And then everything's live, kind of. So, yeah. So it's like, how far the rabbit hole do you go down in terms of making things live? Because actually, really experimental music is much better for like live music than, say, something like synthwave, like especially the synthwave I make, because it consists of chord sequences that I could not play in my hands, that I have put into the piano roll, click them in. I could not play them in my hands unless I practiced for hours and hours and hours, and I don't have that kind of time. I'm a busy man. Yeah, no, just kidding. No, but I'm trying to put any spare time I have, I'm putting it into finishing the next album. So you can make, if you want to make things live with synthwave, it's like, okay, so you could have MIDI clips and trigger them, but then you've got like synths in there, and then you've got CPU problems. So then what? And then you could twiddle the frequency, the cutoff, and the release and the decay, and have some have some control of your send effects. So you've got to figure out the best controller mapping. It's kind of it's a real big puzzle about how to perform live. And so that's why I'm kind of thinking just having tracks that I can that are beat match, which I can DJ with, and then maybe one soft synth in there that I could play with a pad, play a little melody that would be transposed onto a scale within Bitwig. We can do the same thing in Ableton, I believe, transpose the scale, so that you're pressing one key, and then if you press like the next key, and then the next key, that key then isn't in the scale, but it will play the note of the last key that you pressed. So you could kind of force into a scale that way, but still then you've got latency issues, and then you've got there's no way to quantize it. You've got to be in the pocket there. You could do that, but I'm kind of thinking like tracks beat matched, and not beat matched, fucking beat synced or warped, or in Ableton or in Bitwig, I forget what they call it. The tempo's there, the correct tempo's there, but then I would be triggering them as a kind of as a DJ to try and give the crowd what they want from my catalog, and trying to figure out what the best way to give that is to in a live situation. So is that kind of live element, at least, that no two performances are the same, and then maybe have some automated effects, and maybe just have one controller to keep it simple. Because like I did one with two fucking, what are they called, pad controls. That was kind of cool, but sometimes you got very confused. I got very confused about which mapping I was on, and just like then as soon as that happens, you're like frozen. You're like, do you know like that? Have you seen that video of Dave Guetta where I think he's at either Tomorrowland or Ultra? He's like staring out in the stage, like into the abyss. That's what kind of happens, except it's not because you're a fucking hack that doesn't write their own music. It's because you're like overwhelmed with it's like the opposite. It's like instead of having too little to do, you've got too much and your brain freezes. So I'm thinking to have those queued up, and then to have the chaos later. And I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, because I think in America it means something different, but if you're familiar with like drum and bass shows, one thing that's very popular in Europe, especially the UK, I don't know about other parts of Europe, is to have an MC, and the MC is basically, he's kind of a rapper, and hopefully he's good at rapping. If he's terrible at rapping, you just want him to shut the fuck up. But most of the time what the MC does, he's just there to make sure everyone is having a good time. He's just there going, "Is everybody having a good time tonight? Everybody get your hands in the air. This one's a fucking deep D&B roller. Are you ready?" And that's basically what an MC does. And then hopefully rap as well. I used to really want to be an MC, and so I used to try to learn to rap and freestyle. I'm trying to give you a little bit, and the easiest thing to do is to rhyme, especially with drum and bass, is to find words that rhyme with underground. So you got underground, sound, town, down, clown. So, everybody get up to get down. It's the sound of the underground. We're coming through your town. Rock to the beat like this. Rock to the beat like that. Listen to my DJ as you coming through your habitat. Rock to the beat like this. Rock to the beat like this. Listen to my DJ as he hits you with the rhythm stick. And you're just kind of making things up as you go along. And it's very kind of, I guess it's kind of very like Jamaican influenced. But there's kind of, and maybe some roots, there's probably a bit of ska influence to it, I would imagine as well. But effectively, mostly like it's affected by like dancehall reggae sound systems, and I guess in reggae it's called toasting. They're like toasters. They're called because they're toasting. Yeah, so all that stuff is all good, and that's entertaining, and people have a good time, and so I think that's kind of what I think you're doing. Except, there's nothing really. It doesn't really have an 80s aesthetic, kind of like as a drum and bass MC. A little kind of note about my music. What I'm trying to do with my music is I want things to sound retro, but I want them to have a certain futurism about them. And this I could probably go into another video, because if you're really getting into this video and the question of retro futurism is of interest to you, I want you to consider all old house music, acid house, early techno, because like I wanted to say this for another video, but my point is like, if you go back to underground music or non-mainstream music of the 80s and 90s, you will find something that sounds very, very modern, and so you've got all your early acid tracks. Like one of the first things I ever heard was D-Mob's We Call It Acid. So just do a quick YouTube search for D-Mob, We Call It Acid. Very few people are making acid house in the synthwave scene, but I think that's something I would like to see that the community could get behind, would be that we say, okay, this is synthwave because it's retro. But I mean, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on that, because I think VHS Dreams, I love his opinions, and he talks about how, I think it's VHS Dreams, he talks about how his key retro year that best sums up his sound is like 1992. And I'm guessing he's thinking of like things like MacGyver and the kind of films that are around then, like it's like kind of Universal Soldier or something. So I'm guessing that's kind of what like VHS Dreams is getting about, if I'm quoting the right person. I may not, my memory might not be right. But if it was you, leave a comment, let me know. There was some very interesting music in the 80s, because I was kind of considering doing like an acid house track or album. I kind of want to know how well that would be received, or whether I should put that out on a different name. So I'd be curious to know what my regular listeners to music on. My next album actually is not going to be chilled. If you have been listening to my tracks and you're like, oh, this is really chill, and I do love them and everything, I'm not, you know, they're great. I love some of the tracks I've done recently. I've been able to get a few weeks away from them and then gone back to listen to them, and I go, actually, these are really good. Because that's another thing when you're doing an album, like if you listen to any track you like over and over again, it wears on you. And you have to give it some space and come back to it, and then you can judge it properly. It sounds good. So one of those tracks that like a lot of people seem to like, and I really like, is a Beautiful June. Little plug. You can find it on my other channel, Fatal Friction. So my music is I want to have kind of a futurism in it. And what does that mean? It means that for me, I kind of like, I'm trying to mash my other influences in there. But what my theory is, if you've read, I put a post maybe a year ago on my Facebook page. Basically, I was trying to summarize up what I was trying to get to. I think it was in a conversation with Manducator, and I was saying that what I'm trying to get to is to have bollocks. What was I saying? So I'm trying to do stuff that sounds like it could have been made in the 80s. And sometimes I've broken that rule, and it's okay to have rules and break them. But sometimes I've broken that rule and I've said, okay, let's have some like filters and some chopping going on there. Something that could have been done in the 80s if you'd record it to tape and then like duplicate the tape and then tape the tape back together, but like have a way of justifying everything to be 80s. See, I try to make things sound like it's from 80s. I try to make it sound like it's 80s synth. Or if I'm not using a vintage synth, I then try to make that synth, you've got a lot of leeway, because you've got things. I try to make that synth sound like it could be from that period. So like, you've got a leeway with like wave stations came out at the end of the 80s, and you had your Roland D10s and your Kurzweil digital synths. So there's kind of a bit of a leeway, but you can tell like some presets or some sound design where you hear it and it doesn't sound retro. So if you've got that situation, then I think you need to make, this is my opinion, I'm going on an opinionated round, then you need to make the drums sound really retro. And that gives it more of a kind of a retro feel, at least. Actually, I am going to do another video, which I planned out, and I'm sort of just starting to brush on it here, but what I'm going to get into another video is how do we keep innovating in the synthwave scene, because this is like another thing that is on my mind all the time, because what I don't want to see is for the scene to stagnate. Also, it's a genre of music that is essentially built upon nostalgia. So you're replicating things which are already there, and the difficult task there is like, how do you replicate like an 80s sound and still make it sound original? So that would probably be the title for the video. I have to get on it soon, so like keep nagging me about that. I'll get to it. Going back to what I was saying about having different elements but making it to get it to sound like it's from the 80s, maybe I could get away with that because Sting was around for a long time, and he did a lot of cultural appropriation, sounding like he was doing reggae or something. And I'm sure there's other quote unquote pop reggae bands where they've gone for a dancehall accent. So if Sting, for example, was going to do Walking on the Moon through a vocoder, which are both around at that time, you'd essentially have a kind of a dancehall vocoder thing. So in theory, that could be part of my live act. So in theory, it would still have that retro thing going on. Right? That kind of makes sense, right? Okay, I hope so. So, going back to live act, I'm thinking, is it a live act if I've got my fully mastered tracks and I play them and I work like a DJ and then I work the mic, I work the crowd as well? Because even just DJing and MCing at the same time, that's hard work. I think, anyway, if you're going to do a good job of MCing. And it's a different approach. But, I mean, the other end of the spectrum is you make everything live. And then if you make everything live, you're probably better off doing something minimalistic that doesn't have chord progressions, unless you can play chord progressions and that had some kind of a total experiment, like with like loop pedals. You could do loop pedals and play like a virtual analog synth, like a hardware one, so you've got zero latency. But then you wouldn't really be able to play your songs. You might be able to play like the melody of them and put that into the loop pedal. Then you've got a disconnect between your live performance and your actual music, which is also kind of okay as well. But a lot of people would be a bit like, "This is rubbish. Why isn't he playing the songs that I know?" And you'd just be like, "Fuck this shit." So yeah, you're in a difficult spot if you're going to do a live set. And then at the same time, why should you not have why should you rob your fans of getting you to see some kind of attempt at a live performance? Because at the end of the day, even if you were just DJing your tracks live, then that's fucking nerve-wracking anyway, because you're coming in between other DJs who are playing tracks. I mean, ones maybe they haven't written, they're not written by them. Like, so most DJs who don't produce, they're playing other people's music, right? So it's like, even that is nerve-wracking, because you're coming on against you're in between other DJs, and the very worst thing you have, you put your first record on, and then the whole dance floor clears. Then you've got to play with your own music. You don't have the same leverage, and people might not really understand even that you're all playing your own music, because you have to start somewhere. And one thing I don't know about America, but one thing in Europe is like a really easy way to start playing live is just to somehow get into like a warm-up set for a club night somewhere, especially if you're doing something slower or more chilled, or like synthwave. It's not quite as heavy as like tech house or techno or quote unquote deep house. That would mean that you're kind of, you could get in there and find a way to start doing something simple and to building up to being a live set. But there are a really good design. I don't know how his set is now, but there is a DJ, producer I really like called Guy Barotto. Says he doesn't DJ. It's a live set. He plays he's probably changed it by now, but this was about maybe 8 years ago, maybe more. He'd be like, "It's a live set. I play." He'd do the thing where his tracks are all beat matched and he plays them into each other, and then he probably's got some effects going on, but he calls it a live set. So I mean, that's what some people call a live set, So I mean, it's difficult because there's no de facto definition for what a live set is. But here's the other thing: if you are DJing and you are playing all your own tracks, what is it called then? Is it like you kind of want people to know that they're all your own tracks. So and it kind of works online if you were like, because what I would do is, like, if I was making a mix with all my own tracks, I'd call it a production mix, but still nobody else would know what that was. I mean, somebody might be able to figure it out. So then what do you call it? Because you're at a disadvantage then to the other DJs, because you don't have the same full repertoire of the millions of tracks which come out each year, right? Your choice. So your ability to make people to dazzle people with music is severely reduced when you're only playing from the only tracks you've made. But at least you know the tracks a lot better, so you kind of know what to play, where, and when. So that's to sum it all up. When is a live set? A live set? I don't really know. Spoiler alert! I should have put that at the beginning. When is a live set? A live set? It's very much in the eye of the beholder. But like, I think these day and age with social media, we could create tasters for what a live set is, so when people come to the show, they don't get the wrong impression. You know, they could look it up beforehand and go, well, you know, that's not really what I want to watch. Hands up, how many people like have seen live sets with laptops, right? And how, or even not with other bits and pieces or tons of controllers, and how many people have looked at that and gone, I have no idea what the fuck is going on, because you look at it and you're like, what part is even live? I don't know. So you've got like 2 or 3 controllers, and you're twisting a knob on something. You will see them twisting these knobs, and you're listening really hard. You're listening really hard to find out what is that knob tweak doing, and then you're watching for 5 minutes, and then just like, I still can't figure out like what everything is doing. And then maybe you see one thing and you're like, oh yeah, maybe that's that. So you get one element idea of what's live, and that comes back to the fact that like, if you really want live electronic music, I think you've got to go down a very experimental, minimalistic route where you're not playing numbers, but are like literally kind of just vibing, jamming, basically electronic jamming. And then like the question is like, is that a live show then? Because I mean, it is a live show, but are they going to play any of their quote-unquote hits or tracks people know? Because generally, I think a lot of time when people go and pay to see a live show, they want to hear the tracks they know, and they probably want to hear them like they're used to hearing them, maybe with a bit of variation. They don't want to hear something where maybe you're using a totally different synth sound, because it doesn't quite have that same effect sometimes. So then you make stems, and then you have all these stems loaded up, but you're still not playing live, and you're triggering and structuring things like that. Oh God. It's just a never-ending rabbit hole how you perform live with electronic music. It's and especially considering as with most electronics producers, it's just one person. So it's like sometimes it's a duo, but if it's just one person, that's incredibly taxing to try and do so many things live. So it's kind of like, I would say, don't hate on people that do that. My gut feeling is that over time, because every musician has imposter syndrome, I believe, and I think my gut feeling is over time is like, as a result of these kind of like feeling like that you could do more live, people will do more live, but it's a skill that has to be built up. So so that was kind of my point is as well, is like, if somebody is, for example, in a club and the DJ booth is up here, they've got their MIDI controller there, right? And you're in the crowd down here, and you're looking up like this, and you're looking up at them there, you aren't going to see any of what they're doing live anyway. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a minefield. So what are you going to do to be live as an electronic act? And I guess that some of the examples we've got are like Deadmau5 and stuff, and I like his music, and even though I've watched his live shows, recording, they're on YouTube and stuff, and it's just kind of like, I ain't got a clue. I know you can hear some things which are live, but for the most part, it's like his DJ sets are more interesting from what I've seen. It's just like, because the live stuff to me seems too seamless that he does. It just seems like I kind of trust him enough that he's doing stuff properly live, but when I listen to it, I'm like, I wouldn't know. And I was lucky enough to see Daft Punk when they came and play in Dublin back in the 2000s in Marley Park, and that was another thing. I had a brilliant time. The music was great, but it was like, I have no idea if they're miming or not. It was all so perfect that I was like, I don't know. I'm a big fan, but I was at the end, I was like, I don't know, it was live. It sounded so perfectly planned out. And I think there's a Coachella live CD, and if you go, I remember having gone to listen to that and just been like, yeah, they put out a live CD, I bought it, and having listened to that, it's like, it sounds very, very similar to the live show I saw. So even your heroes can kind of, but I believe deadmau5 does this stuff live, but I'm not convinced like Daft Punk going live. But now I think if they do a tour again, they'll do it with live musicians or whatever, and then you can call it a live set. I'm pretty sure their very early performances were much more live, because I've seen pictures where they've got all the gear out on the table. But in the Pyramid, fuck knows what they do. Apparently they have controllers to do stuff, but I think they might just, they're kind of that kind of artsy and that much interested in visuals that they might just be doing the visuals live, for all I know. That's not entirely possible, because I don't think they're hacks about it, but I think, you know, they've got some things they're controlling live, but it sounded very sequenced. But yeah, so that is my rant on when is a live show, and the answer is sometimes it's a live show, but the answer is really is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or rather the live show is in the eye of the beholder. It's really like a consensus of a group of listeners to decide whether they think it's live or not. Electronic musicians have the interesting disposition that often their acts are just one or two people, so the complexities and the music is very heavily programmed and edited, so the complexities of playing that live, because traditional music is often just musicians playing in a room all mic'd up, recording each bit separately. It's already a live performance. I mean, they edit it, but for the most part, it's live. When you listen to a rock band showing, like, I know nothing about a rock band, the Kaiser Chiefs, what's that other rock band? The one with the Sex is on Fire, Arcade Fire. They're kind of okay. Sigur Rós, I like them. Sigur Rós. They're almost chill wave in my book. They're kind of like just so dreamy. Yeah, that's essentially almost a live performance when it's being recorded, and then it's mixed down. There's the engineering part. So when you take down the road, it's very simple then to recreate. But with electronic music, it's like everything is either programmed, it's recorded in, and then quantized. You know, or you record like for 10 minutes, like I was talking earlier with the vocals, or like with an analog synth with no MIDI, and you play that in, and then you take the best bit. Oh, that's the other thing. It's like most of the time when I'm sending MIDI to like a hardware synth, it's like you gotta record it for a few minutes just to get the bit that's most in the pocket, because even the MIDI is a little janky sometimes, and it's out of sync. So yeah, so doing everything live, I mean, oh my God, it's like, I salute anyone that does that, and that is doing very, like, heavily composed music, like synthwave and retrowave. But, you know, if you had just had, like, a bass, a synth, and a pre-programmed drums, and you were playing the bass and the synth with one hand, that would be the ultimate live thing. But then you wouldn't be able to automate filters and other stuff. So then you could play the synth, but then automate the bass. Do you see where I'm going? It's just like these are the problems when it comes to organizing a live show for electronic music. And there is also a lot, especially in Europe, there's also a lot of crossover with the digital DJing revolution, and people making music and not being able to really do much in a live set. So it's kind of, you know, there is an element of pushing play in everything electronic musicians do live. So you can't get away, if you're playing instruments, you can't get away from having a drum machine, unless, like with the Vampire Step Down show, you hire a drummer, or you have your buddy who's a drummer, and in that case, then you can see him quite clearly from the video. The cameras were good setting up, because you could see where he's triggering stuff. You know it's live, you know, and you can see his face as well, like when he's playing. And you can get more into his experience of how he is performing. You can tell he's performing live. Do you know what I mean? And that I salute that stepdad. So yeah, so you can see that's going on there when he's performing live, and he's really been practicing, and he's laying his riffs down, and he's doing it on the keyboard as well, and you can see the effort he's put into it there, and you know that's as live as you're going to get, but he can't play more than one instrument at once live. So something has to be, you got to press play on something, and you can see that in the video because this has got some really good mappings with the Novation. It's like a launch key, I think it's called, or something. It's a keyboard, and it's got rubber pads which map to Ableton to launching clips. I think that's my guess. What's going on there? Yeah, watch that video. I will find the link and put it in the description. So watch Vampire Stepdad's video. I can't remember what I talked about. It's been an hour. So, but if there's anything else there, I'd say watch that. Watch any other links I put in there. But mainly, I'm just going to put the Vampire Stepdad video in. You should check that out. And if you got to the end of this rant, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. I got some more ideas for videos. I think it was Snow Kitten on Twitter was asking me about talking about selling out, and I do want to expand on that topic. But there were other topics I touched on in this video that I would like to expand as well. So it's kind of as long as I can turn up, as long as I can turn up and make the video, I think that's the best thing. Okay, thanks for listening and or watching and or both. And just a little plug, sponsored plug at the end. Buy my music. If you like these videos, buy my music. I haven't got a Patreon. Just go and buy my music. It's the link in the description. And or if you can't buy it, just listen to it. And there are a bunch. Every album has a free track. You're just going to give me your email address, and someday I might use that email list for something. But I'd rather have it. I'd rather have it and not use it than use it and not have it. No, I mean I'd rather have it. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So that's why the email list is there. So yeah. So thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe and like if you want to get the next video. Because I'm going to try and get these like once a week, but it could be once a month, and I have other things coming up which may get in the way of me being regular with it. So please subscribe if you want to see more videos like these as well, and leave a comment with suggestions for what you'd like to, if you've got any questions or any topics you want me to cover, especially related to the synthwave scene and the retro synthwave, chillwave, vaporwave. Just let me know, because this is what I'm interested in and talking about, and and I'll have to get my ideas out and have you guys let me know what you think of my ideas so I can make them better. All right, see you next time.